Thank you, Madam Speaker, for the opportunity to speak to this very important motion, the State of the Nation. Madam Speaker, because we have some time, allow me to begin with sending my sincere condolences to all families that were affected by the loss of their loved ones. Allow me to name, because I'll use my time to name the young people who lost their lives. Madam Speaker, we lost the life of Brian Lemayan Kasaine from Narok, Austin Makoha Nakuru, Mike Kihunga Nakuru, Kelvin Madanga Nakuru, Chris Gitonga Nanyuki, Kennedy Onyango, whose mother's image has not left my mind, from Rongai. We lost Rex Masai from Machakos, Matthew Njoroge, Kevin Mawasi, Bisley Kogi, David Chege, Erickson Kialo Mutisia, Ibrahim Kamau Anjiru, Kennedy Odhiambo Maina, Wilson Sitati, Kennedy Njeru, Eric Kayoni Kieni, Eric Kiratu, Brian Kimathi, Kariton Mwangi, Ernest Kanyi, Caroline Shiramba from Kakamega, Brayo from Kisumu, Mbithi Alaya Scott from Kisumu, Emmanuel Giggs Tata from Mombasa, Joshua Ombati from Mombasa, Clinton Mwavali Kapsabet, Kevin Odhiambo Siaya, Brian Rongo, Bernard Mungai Ndwati, and we have another nearly 10 whose bodies are lying in the mortuary unidentified. Madam Speaker, I believe we have many more whose names had not reached the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights. I felt it's important to name them, Madam Speaker, because what has happened in this country is a revolution for the third liberation of this country, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the Genzs are simply trying to get back this country on track. Madam Speaker, I wish people would not speak. People are consulting so loudly that I cannot even hear. Listen to what I'm doing. Madam Speaker, the Genzs are telling us a very simple thing, that in 2010, we put in place a constitution to guide how this country should be governed. But this country is not being governed in that manner. And they are telling us that there is a very important provision in the Constitution that we have chosen as a country, particularly the leadership, to ignore. They are bringing us back to the implementation of Article 10 of the Constitution. Madam Speaker, they are bringing back the conscience of this nation. They are telling us that we must go back to what Article 10 says about respect for the rule of law, respect for human rights, governance in a manner that respects equity, equality, and the most important one, that we must now start governing this country applying the principles of transparency and accountability. And Madam Speaker, because a lot has been said, I want us to immediately move on how best we can actually speak to the issue of transparency and accountability. The finance bill was a trigger, and the President has returned the finance bill to the people of Kenya. Madam Speaker, what we are forgetting, that the finance bill is usually passed to finance an appropriation act that had already been assented to. It is usually passed to speak to budget items that were in the budget policy statement. Madam Speaker, the mistake number one that we do in this country, we do not publicly discuss the budget items and the appropriations that we are put in the Appropriations Act. And the Budget Committee and the National Assembly have failed us because they did not scrutinize budget policy statement, they did not scrutinize the appropriations bill properly to be able to tell the President some of these things you have put here cannot fly. Madam Speaker, part of those items include the following: confidential budget in DP's office, 800 million. Confidential budget in the President's, in the State House, 1.4 billion. 863 million for hospitality in the Deputy President's office. 400 million for dealing with drugs, and Nakada will be given some more money. 320 million for innovation in the Deputy President's office. 1.5 billion for renovation of state lodges. Meantime, we have 600 billion only for education. 126 billion only for health. Madam Speaker, I can go on. This is a public document. Please go and look at it. Madam Speaker, what the Gen Zs were telling the President is we must go back to the drawing board. We must reorganize the budget items. We must revisit the Appropriations Act which you passed. The President assented to the Appropriations Act, Bill number 34, and today we have a circular from the Treasury guiding all accounting officers to rework their budget so that we can raise the 26 billion that we will not be able to raise in taxes, and in order to rework the budget. Madam Speaker, this is my view, that it is the same cabinet secretary who put this bullshit in this budget. So he cannot be the one to be trusted to do this.
Senator Catherine Muma, that is not
parliamentary
language.
I withdraw.
Withdraw the term bullshit.
Madam Speaker, I think it was agreed we speak with emotion. And I think those items...
Senator Catherine, not with unparliamentary
I withdraw. Madam Speaker, what I have just read, and I could read more, is despicable as budget items for this country. And that we are trusting the same person who put it and took it to Parliament to be the one to reorganize is lying to Gen Zs. Madam Speaker, what Gen Zs were telling the President, we need a public participation and a participatory approach to reorganize our budget for the financial year 2024-2025 in order to together come up with a saving. I believe if we relook at the budgets at all levels, we will probably save more than the 300 and whatever billion that they wanted to actually raise from the taxes. So the big job that the National Assembly and the Senate should be doing is to do the big job of allowing our experts, whether in civil society, among the Gen Zs, to openly and transparently audit the budget items one by one for the executive, for Parliament, for the judiciary, and put money where it is required. So where we need essential services, we must put money where we need essential services. Where we are wasting money, we must remove that money, because what are we doing? We are working on budgeting for corruption. So number one, Madam Speaker, the President said that he will go and borrow for the deficit. I am recommending that we don't allow one more shilling to be borrowed until we put in place a system that can ensure accountability and transparency with debt. So, Madam Speaker, I'm suggesting not borrowing 1 shilling for the 2024-2025 budget. Madam Speaker, number 2, I am recommending that we rationalize the expenditure. We need to find out how much does hospitality for 863 million look like in one office. We need to clearly agree that is budgeted corruption. It must be moved aside. We need to start asking, what is this confidential budget? What does it normally do? And when we are doing the audit, I would want to find out, in the previous year, how much was there for hospitality? In the previous year, how much was there for confidential? What did it do? Madam Speaker, we need to start doing that. As we are reducing expenditure, one of the other things we need to do is to find out, how do we identify duplicated jobs? I have just given one example. We have Nakada dealing with drugs, but you give the Deputy President 400 million to deal with drugs. We have county governments doing county roads, but you have CDF being given money to do county roads. We have national government doing bursaries, but you have the President with bursaries. You have governors giving bursaries, and yet education is a national budget. We will save a lot by looking at duplicated items to save that money and send it to the essential services. As we are doing so, Madam Speaker, we must not reduce the budget to social spending that keeps the dignity of the human beings in this country. Our development strategy must be people-centered. We must provide education. We can only keep increasing our budget in education. We must provide better health. We must keep increasing the budgets in health. We cannot say we are not now going to pay the interns. We are not going to pay the doctors, and yet we have millions for mandazis. It is not acceptable, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, we also need to look at the issue of political employments. And I'm suggesting Public Service Commission must be summoned to the Senate to tell us what structures it has set up of a parallel public service that is not provided for in the Constitution or in the law. How many advisors do we have in the presidency? How many do we have around the cabinet secretaries? How many, even the county public service board should tell us how many advisors do we have in counties? That is a parallel, silent public service. As they are telling us, the SRC must join them to tell us how they have cleared payments of salaries to unstatutory and unconstitutional offices. Who is going to be held accountable for that? So those two bodies must tell us what we need to do. We also need to find out, why are employment laws not being followed? Why are constitutional commissions, which are supposed to be independent, not doing this? Why are TSC letters being peddled by politicians? Why is TSC issuing employment letters? TSC has been practicing has been in the practice of employing those who've been waiting before the ones who are qualified recently. Can we have a public audit to find out how many people were politically employed because they know politicians, and those who are waiting and are sons and daughters of poor people were not able to get those issues. Madam Speaker, we need to also audit debt. And I'll go quick. We need to audit our debt and ensure to find out documents and all agreements relating to that need to be made available to Parliament so that Parliament can actually audit this. We also need to audit the debt expenditure. So we borrowed for this. Have we been doing this? And I'm suggesting that we get a special team to be able to do this. I think the Auditor General needs to be facilitated. Parliamentary PBO office needs to be revamped to help us to do debt auditing, Madam Speaker. If we do this and we do it transparently so that our audit is made public, there's not an audit to be hidden, then the Kenyan people will be able to know what we are doing. Madam Speaker, we must audit all funds. We have so many funds. The Youth Fund, the Women Fund, the CDF. How are they being implemented? We need to audit them. I think that the thinking behind funds is good and is noble, but are they being used for purposes that they were supposed to? We need to do an audit. Those ones that are being used for purposes that they should be used, be retained, and the others that are not being used for the purposes that they should actually be looked at. Madam Speaker, World Bank report in 2020 reported that we have dead infrastructure. They said 50% of CDF projects were dead because when an MP comes, they don't want to touch what the other one did. That is public money. We need to find out whether we need to put in place better structures for the management of CDF. Madam Speaker, then we come to Bunge. Bunge must do its bit like every other. The National Assembly, together with the Senate, have passed laws that are unconstitutional. I want us to do an audit of the cost that unconstitutional laws being challenged in court have cost the taxpayer because we did not do our job as Bunges. I want to find out how many laws we have passed. For instance, 30 minutes to pass a law to enable the KDF to be set against our case. No public participation, no adequate time for members of Parliament to discuss that. Madam Speaker, as Bunge, we must take responsibility for passing laws that have violated the Constitution, for passing laws that have circumvented the Constitution. Madam Speaker, I want to speak to the people of Kenya as well. As we are speaking and everybody is taking responsibility, I would want our people to also take responsibility. When we queue to receive 200 shillings from politicians in funerals and elsewhere, I want us to start asking ourselves, where do you think this person has got money from? He does not have even one industry in that county of yours. He does not have a factory where he's employing anybody. He moves around in very, very affluent vehicles, dressed up well, and just stands and dishes money, and you take that money. Ask yourself, who in their right mind would take monies that they have worked hard in a business to build a business and start dishing it out? What are we doing? That is money that should have been providing your schools that is being dished out to you. That is money that should have been making it possible for you to get access to health that is being dished out to you. Madam Speaker, we need to speak to our people to say, do not encourage thieves and do not elect thieves. Let us do what is right and let us ensure that this country moves forward. So it is a moment of reckoning, not just for members of Parliament, not just for the President, not just for the CSS, even for the church leaders and other leaders. Where do you think somebody, Catherine Muma, who does not have any factory anywhere, all of a sudden has 20 million to give you? Why don't you ask yourself, na hii 20 million aliitoa wapi? I think as a country, The Gen Zs are calling all of us to recheck our conscience, are calling all of us.
Senator Catherine, your time is up. 1 minute only to finish the sentence. Just 1 minute.
I will finalize. Madam Speaker, I think I've spoken to every sector of society, and all I'm saying, all of us need to introspect and do the right thing for this nation. Thank you.
Senator Karungo Dhangwa.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I'm really happy also to weigh in into this motion and support this motion. Madam Speaker, on 26th of June, I had written to your office requesting us to do the same, to have a motion to discuss what we are discussing today. I'm happy, though I did not get a reply, I'm happy it has come through the channels that it has come, for us to discuss this issue. Madam Speaker, this is the time for the people of Kenya to know that Senate is the upper house. It is what was meant to be by the drafters of the Constitution, Madam Speaker, because they wanted this house to be more an appeal chamber, to be a house that will bring appeal mechanism where Kenyans who are not happy with what is happening with the executive, with the other assemblies or with the National Assembly will always have a channel to come and weigh in and give their contribution, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, if the finance bill was to come to the Senate, what happened to this country could not have happened. Those maandamano that were here could not have happened, Madam Speaker, because here at the Senate, we relook into things afresh. We scrutinize again. We look at the proposals afresh by hearing and listening to the people. I can give a very good example, Madam Speaker. There was the affordable bill that was brought here, passed by over 400 MPs, Madam Speaker. But when it came to this House, we relooked into it. We gave it 49 amendments, new things that were not there, Madam Speaker. What we are trying to say, Madam Speaker, is that if the finance bill was to come, and we should fight for that space, so that anything that is passed by the National Assembly should always be coming to this House, so that we can discuss it again and again. And this country could not have been banned if it came to this House, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, on the issue of Gen Z, and I take this time to condole with all those who lost their children, to those mothers and fathers who lost their children. And that's why we are here, we are discussing that everything, every stone must be turned. Whoever acted contrary to the law must face the law, Madam Speaker. And it's also good, because I said, I don't want to be part of, sensational comments. I want to be level-headed, Madam Speaker. I want to talk without exaggeration. I want to talk from a point of fact. And that's why I want to tell people what Gen Z mean. Many people don't even know. I saw a